still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet.
There's a much better chance you'll hear me if I do it like this instead of hold it down here. So, of course, as Will was saying, if somebody has something that they're really feeling right now, I can sit or you can save it, and I'll try to not be too long, and so you can share it. One of the things I think about, when Will mentioned to me that Neil wasn't going to be able to be here in time, and I know he had some things he was on his heart that he was preparing to say. So I always feel like it'll be okay. When we come together, the whole point of us being together is to somehow to receive, to walk away with something that will help us. It'll affect our thinking in some way, and reflection, self-reflection, something that will increase our relationship with God. But a lot of times those things come from giving as well as they do receiving. So if that's our goal, is to do that, and we're all wanting to do the same way, if we were all on a boat together and it had a hole in the bottom of it, and suddenly we were taking on water, we would feel like it would be in the best interest of all of us to get the water out of the boat, right? Till we could get to land. So you might think, well, okay, well, if there was one guy just standing over there with a little cup and he was throwing water out, it wouldn't be really helping us all a whole lot, would it? I mean, the whole point is to keep the thing floating. Well, that's the kind of the way it is with spiritual things. God shows himself greatest in his ability to work through diversity and to show that he really is among us. That's one of the things I really liked about the songs that we were singing today. When I say liked, when Neil or Will asked me if I would felt anything to say, I don't like to know what the songs are. I don't like to get a heads up on those things, because if I'm thinking about something, and I might be thinking about several different things, then when I come in and I start listening to the songs and feeling what they were feeling, what Will was feeling, those that were putting these things together, then I'm thinking about those things, and I feel like somehow they connect with what I'm feeling. Then I feel like, oh, okay, there's the beginning of like a puzzle. It's like when you do, puzzles probably aren't as popular as they once were because we have so much more to be entertained by. But I think they were pretty popular at one period of time. And when you put a puzzle together, if you're doing it with several people, you're picking up pieces and you're saying, well, where does this piece fit? And so sometimes it doesn't fit anywhere. Sometimes you have to wait till something comes together and, it's all blue and you got a red piece and you're like, well, no, I got to find there's got to be a transition from a blue that gets me to a little bit of red so that I can put my little puzzle piece in place. It's kind of maybe an awkward example, but that's how I think that the Spirit of God works with us. I think he's giving each one of us a little piece of the puzzle, something that we can contribute and that we can do. And when that happens, and you start laying down these pieces and you seeing them connect, after a while you have a big picture. And then you see, well, what was the point? Now, sometimes, it makes it a little more complicated if you don't know what the puzzle looks like, the pieces look like before you start laying it down. If you don't know what the general overall look is, then it's going to be a little more complicated. But it is still doable. It is still possible. You just may get to a point where you go, oh, wait a minute, let's just move the whole thing around like this. We got it upside down, because you start on the corners and work in. So maybe I'm a corner today. I don't know. But I felt like my little corner piece fit with some of the things that were going in there. Now, a lot of times you can have a little piece of something that's inspiring you, and you can think, well, it doesn't fit. And that's okay. Maybe it's not for that. Maybe that's not the right time to lay that one on the table. But you don't just have to have one puzzle piece. You can actually have a lot of puzzle pieces, thoughts, things that you're experiencing, that if you open yourself up to the things of God, he will give you a piece of the puzzle. If you want one, and you really want to engage in this process, then I'm convinced God will give you something, and you'll know when it's the right time to place it down. Now, it may be that you feel like it's the right time and you're not sure. Go with the feeling. Because I think sometimes maybe you lay a little something down, you feel like, hey, this is important, and all of a sudden you find out everybody had 4 pieces that fit to that thing, and you didn't really know why. You just felt a little bit of inspiration. So I was thinking about these things. Now, in this type of a setting, and I really think in 1 Corinthians 14, I really think that's what Paul was trying to say, because there's a question that he says in, let me see if I can find it real quick here. There's a question that he poses, or the way that he says something here, it doesn't really make a lot of sense if it, excuse me? Well, that's what I'm looking for. It's, let's see, sorry. 1 Corinthians 14 and, oops, let's see, 14 and 14:26. Now, he's just talked about leading up to this point in 1 Corinthians 14:26. He's just talked about the importance of prophesying. And he makes this statement about prophesying. And sometimes from our cultural perspective, as words can have different meanings to us than maybe it always meant to them. He speaks about this. He talks about all prophesying. He says, he goes up into this point, and he's talking about speaking in tongues and prophesying, but I just want to focus in on this point, on starting with 24, and then we'll work down to this. He says, but if all prophesy, and one comes in that doesn't believe or is unlearned, he's convinced of all and judged of all. Thus, the secrets of his heart are made manifest. So falling down on his face, he will worship God and report that God is in you of a truth. So that's kind of, if you think about that, so what's happening here? He's saying if every person who speaks will speak from that inspiration that they feel, that God's going to provide you, then when somebody comes in that's an unbeliever, or they're unlearned, they haven't learned this aspect of God, then through that, somehow God is going to reveal their heart to them. Now, if God reveals the secrets of their heart, then how can we know? If they're secrets, there's something we don't know. There would only be something that they would only know, and they might not even know. Have you ever experienced that something happens or something says something to you, and it triggers something in you, and you go, sometimes for good, sometimes not for good. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, that's in my heart. What in the world? I didn't even realize that. Have you ever been like blindsided by something that was exposed in you to yourself? It's kind of like those dreams of, being in a public place and being in your underwear, and it's that kind of a thing. And so he's going through this, and he says, and then they're going to say that God is actually in you. Well, what do you mean God is in you? Why would God be in you? How would they know God was in you? It's because God would be speaking through you. So God somehow is in there, inspiring and motivating those things as they come out. So as he continues on to 26, he asks a question. How is it then, brethren? Now, if we put the question mark there, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? How is it then, brethren? How's what? He wasn't asking a question before, he was explaining something to him. And different translations would do this different way. But I would say that because there is no punctuation in the Greek, they didn't have like little question marks and commas and stuff like that. That just wasn't the way they did it. So you had to kind of figure out where those things were. I would say that the way that this is intended is, how is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you has something already, has a psalm or a teaching or a tongue or a revelation or interpretation. Let everything be done for edification. So I think what he's not trying to say, oh, those things aren't good. I believe he's trying to tell us, be inspired. Don't be too concrete in something specific. Don't come so set on what has to be done that God can't give inspiration in those things. Everything that we do as a group should be for edification, right? Would they disagree with that? But how are we best edified? Are we best edified by one, or are we best edified when all of us are involved in those things? So, okay, so now getting back to the songs. I thought I'm not sure where all that came from, but I wanted to share this thought along with it from 2 Chronicles. Let me see if I can find it here. I think it's 2 Chronicles 14. Yeah, it starts on 14. Got to find the right distance here, for my glasses. Okay, so you've got this king, and his name is Asa, and it says of Asa, it's in 14:2. It says, "And Asa did that which was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God, and he took away the altars and the strange gods and the high places, and broke down the images, cut down the groves." All those things were things that were idolatry to other gods, worship of other gods. And so he's a really good guy, and he's doing all the right stuff, and he's building fenced cities in Judah, and they're having a lot of rest. And then what happens is, there's the Ethiopians, they come up with 1,000,000, which is 1,000,000? It's 1,000,000. I mean, it's a big number, right? That's probably why they wrote 1,000,000. Million just sounds unbelievable. But and Asa only had about 500,000, and also the Ethiopians had 300 chariots. So chariots were like equal to like 3 or 4 men each. So that gave them even more of an advantage, because that was something that was very, very powerful. And so what happens is, Asa realizes that he's outnumbered and he's concerned. And so it says in 11, it says, "And Asa cried unto the Lord his God and said, It is nothing with thee to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. Help us." And so he's crying out to God. He's saying, it doesn't really matter to you. And I'm thinking of this in connection with some of the songs that we were singing about our confidence in God. And so what happens is God responds to him, and God's let's see, where does he say that? And it says, and so the Lord smote the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. And so God intervenes as they go out to battle, and the Ethiopians, they just flee. And so God's really showing himself on behalf of the Jews, of Judah. Now, when you're reading through some of these things, sometimes you're going to hear Judah and Israel. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes it'll say Israel, talk about Israel. Sometimes it'll talk about Judah, and it seems like they should be the same thing, but they're not. King Solomon, most people are probably know of King Solomon. He had a, hey, if you get an inspiration, you can, come on. So.
Okay.
So King Solomon, after his reign, he really didn't do what God wanted him to do. So God took his son, Rehoboam, and he said, I'm splitting the kingdom. And so 10 of the tribes, they went their own way. And they followed this guy, Jeroboam. And so Jeroboam was over the 10 tribes, and then Rehoboam was over the 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And so now when they first split up, God told them, he said to Jeroboam, he said, now Jeroboam, he did it in a more godly way, but he said, Jeroboam, look, if you let all the people, I've done this. I'm giving you these 10 tribes because I'm unhappy with what's going on here. But if you'll let them go back to Jerusalem every year and go to the feasts and worship me, then I'm going to make your house like the house of David. And we could have had like two kingdoms that could have been used in some way to further express God and his sovereignty. But what happened was Jeroboam was afraid that if he let them go back and do their thing, spiritually, that they would be drawn in over a period of time and he would lose his power, even though God had told him that would not be the case. So you've got this tension between Israel and Judah. Israel does not want any of their people going back to Judah. I mean, it's just not good business, right? So what happens is after this great thing that happens with King Asa, stuff's going good. I mean, he's like tearing down groves. He's got a mom that's kind of sitting there as queen, but she's got a little bit of idolatry going down. So he tells her, look, no nepotism here. You got to step down. So he puts her out of her position for her idolatry. And it says of him that he did that which was perfect, even though there were some things he didn't do. It says that he was perfect before the Lord in his heart. So he was doing a lot of good stuff. So when this all happened, Israel now says, we need to blockade these guys. We need to not, we need to shut them down. We need to get over there close and block it off so nobody can get in there and nobody can get out. And so they set forth to do that. Well, what Asa does is he sees that Israel has like created this pact with Syria, the Syrians. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to take gold that we have out of the treasury, and I'm going to go to the Syrians, and I'm going to tell them, look, come on, don't form a little alliance here with me. These people, I'll give you this gold. Go after Israel from the back there and get them out of our way, because what they're doing is they're harming us. And that doesn't, I mean, so far he's perfect in his heart, right? So it would give us the idea that he's not really doing this to try to do something evil. He sees this as a good opportunity. Well, what happens when he does that is God is he's very disappointed in him. And he says, let me find it here. Okay, right before it says, nevertheless, the heart of Asa was perfect before the Lord. And it says, and there was no more war for 35 years. And then it says, Bashan, the king of Israel, came up and built Ramah with the intent that it might let none go in or come out to Asa, the king of Judah. And so Asa brought out silver and gold of the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the king to send to Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, and that dwelt at Damascus. And this is what he said, there's a league between thee and me, and there was, as there was between my father and thy father. Behold, I have sent thee silver and gold. Break your league with Baasha, the king of Israel, that he may depart from me. And so they form this alliance, and they do. And so then after all this happens, this seer or prophet, Hanani, he comes to the king of Judah and he says, because you have relied on the king of Syria and not relied on thy God, therefore is the host of the king of Syria escaped out of your hand. Were not the Ethiopians and the Lubims a huge host, and very many chariots and horsemen? Yet because thou did rely on the Lord, he delivered them into thine hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on the behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards him. And then he basically tells him, along that line, he basically tells him, okay, you're going to get war from here on out. So what I was feeling in that story, what I was thinking about is how does that relate to me in my relationship with God? Because I can always take these older stories and look at them in the Old Testament and go, those guys were just such, dummies. How could they not trust God in those things? But the point of the thing that the writer is trying to tell us here is he's trying to show that when we are up against outrageous odds and we can't overcome things and God becomes the only opportunity, then it's who are you going to trust? I mean, you're going to trust God, right? I mean, if you don't have anything else to lean on, if you don't have anything, any other possible way or no possible way out, then God becomes the only option. That's not always a bad thing. I mean, I don't know if any of us really like it on the front end, but it's in those situations, if you look at some of the things we're singing about, that's the type of thing it's talking about. But we have this place where we move from what is out of our control to what is in our control. And we begin to think, well, if I can do this, if I can kind of manipulate this situation, your heart can be right. You can want something pure in heart in the outcome. But anytime we begin to put our confidence in other things other than God, I know there's things that we do that are just wise and smart, and those things are good. But I'm talking about those periods of time where God's dealing with something and it's not going your way. And you somehow have to defend yourself. I would never want us to think that God does not want us to defend each other, because he's all about the defense of the fatherless and the widow and justice. It's just, he just asks you not to defend yourself. That's kind of the way the kingdom of God works. I'm not, I didn't come up with it. I believe it's the way God does it. But it's through those things, just like us coming together, it's through those things that God has an opportunity to show himself on behalf of those who have a pure heart. And when it comes down to it, that's the thing that God is looking at. He's looking at your heart, even more than your actions, because your actions will be a result of what's really in your heart. And sometimes our actions, we can be quick to look back and be grieved when we recognize our actions didn't really reflect what our heart is feeling along that line. So do you have those songs? Can you pull the first one up? I think, let's see. Can you go to the next verse? One more? Okay, this was one. This is one that I thought was really interesting, that this power, if it lives in us, that same power moves mountains, and that power can calm the raging sea. Is there another one after this? The bridge, yeah. The bridge. That we stand in victory. There's nothing that can defeat us in a spiritual way. It doesn't mean that we will not have adversity. It doesn't mean that we won't have questions that we don't always have answers to. But I believe people who are being inspired in the contemporary Christian music scene are getting some really good stuff. That there's some but sometimes I don't think we really get the depth of maybe what God's inspiring to them. Sometimes we get a little bit more into the mood and the feeling, but the words, if we only sat and chanted these, it should have as much power. Now, the music is good. I enjoy that. It touches my heart. But it's this types of things. Can you go to the last song? I just don't want to belabor it or I'll if you've got the last one, yeah. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. Can you go to the next verse? Even when I can't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. I believe whoever got this song, I think that was pretty inspired. I think that's a message that God's trying to get across to us. Then even when we don't see it, he's working. And even when you don't feel it, he's still working. He never stops working. And I'll give you one more, and I think there's some other things in there, but we'll just leave it at that. But there's one other quick story I would like to add to this to kind of sum up this last aspect. Is in Luke, Jesus is telling the story about this judge that this woman needs help from. And he's an unrighteous judge. But she just keeps pestering him. And finally he just gives in. And so he gives in and he exonerates her cause. There's something unjust that's happening to her. And so as he's doing that, let me just pull it up here because I don't want to. Let's see. Hang on here. Okay. It'll give you a couple more seconds to get your thought together out there, whoever's feeling something. So, yeah, he says, hear what the unjust judge says. And this is what then the unjust judge just said, that she's wearing me out. I'm gonna help her because she's just wearing me out. He says, and shall God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him? Though he bear long with them, I tell you, he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on the earth? In other words, do you believe it? Do you believe that God wants to bring justice to your life? And God may be bearing with it. He may be bearing with you. He may be bearing with the situation because it's not the right time. I don't understand all the way God works, but I believe he works. If it takes for him to come again to show, or for God to really have the opportunity to avenge those, and I don't mean like go take out your enemies. That's not what I'm talking about. But to really bring justice into your life for the things that are wrong, that you've suffered, will you have faith when he comes that it is going to happen? If you have that kind of trust, if we believe that, then everything we go through is a stepping stone to that. And it has purpose. He's telling us if he's not doing it, he wants to do it speedily. The unjust judge only does it because he wears him out. We should never view God as we want to wear him down. Like, okay, I'm going to pray again. I know he's going to get tired of this. I'm going to just wear him down until he does what I need. No, God already wants things to turn out in a very positive way for you. Your concept of positive may just be different than his concept of positive. I mean, but in the end, God's concept of positive, when he brings it fully forward, Oh, it's always way better than what we could have wanted. So that's kind of what I was feeling. Maybe you're feeling something. Maybe you don't really want to share it. But if you do feel something, then step out, trust that little feeling on the inside, and see what God will do with it.
I always get inspired on a bad hair day. Oh, wait, they're all bad hair days for me. No, I'm like, why did I get up that day? No, I had this thought, and I thought, no, Todd's going to go on and talk, so I won't. Well, Lord, if you want me to say it, let his puzzle piece tie in with mine, and you left it on the bridge that made me want to say something, and I'm like, oh, he did it. Okay, so this is my thought. Yeah, that's it. You never stop working. You never stop working. So, like, if you want to find God, the answer is do something, because he's not in the not doing something. I'm not saying he doesn't tell you to wait, but this is the quick thought I had, and it ties with this. And I'm really saying this. I think maybe I'm supposed to publicly say it, so I put myself on notice. Sometimes you say it and you're like, oh, God, I've got to live it now. But I've had these prayers I've been saying. It's like, Lord, you do this and I'll do this. And then, so this is a glimpse into the mind of how Debbie thinks with God, okay? Scary place. So like God's trekking along. I'm like, I'll go. I'll do it. He's like, go. I spoke it. You heard it? Go. And I'm like, and then I freeze there. And he's like, okay, go. And I'm like, and it happens over and over again. And I find myself always in this, it's like, what are you doing, posing for a picture? And about a year and a half ago, I felt like God, I did it again on a big thing. Like bam, you open the door and I'll do this. 10 days later, a door I did not see coming opened wide. And I didn't do it. I did it in reverse order. I didn't, not tithe in the old-fashioned way, but I didn't put his first, and I've burned ever since. And I did this, and I feel like a year and a half ago, he finally went, what is that? And it's like, I'm going, and it's like, I don't know, what part of that is go? What part of, that's nothing. And so I feel like, for me, today, this prompted me. I was talking to Sue before church about it, some of these things. But when that bridge said, you never stop working, if in doubt, regardless of what he's telling you to go and do, regardless of what it is, maybe get up and go to work, or go to church, or go help somebody, or go across the world. You know, of all things, Neil came in here today, but everybody's got their thing that you can say, they're an example of this, Julie's an example of this. Everybody's got their thing that they're strong with and they're good at. Well, Neil's thing is, if God says go, he's like, okay. And he just goes. One time he said he wants to take everybody with him, great snowball. But, and I do that too, and then it winds up clogging up everything. I can't get through the door, and then I'm in that position again. But if God is saying go, regardless of what it is, he's working. And if I want to line up with him, then I need to be doing something. So do something.
So I'm glad I let Debbie talk first, because that kind of leads into what I was thinking. So I took a leave of absence from work, and I took a month off, and I'm actually start back to work tomorrow. So I covet your prayers for tomorrow, starting back to work. I'm going to be like, I don't know. Haven't looked at emails for a month, so this ought to be fun. I uninstalled the app on my phone so I wouldn't look at emails. So anyway, but tomorrow I have to look at them all again. But anyway, and the reason I did that was because I had arrived in a place in my life that I went through a very dark depression, And I suffer from cyclical depression. And at this point, it was one of those that was like, okay, this is nuts. Why does this keep happening? I mean, I do have a medical condition that makes it happen, but then there's these other things. Why is this happening? Why? And so I went to my therapist, and she's like, you do realize that for the last 3 years that I've treated you, every time this happens, there's always this conversation about you're not following your calling. Okay. So what does that mean? And so I decided to take a month off, and first week was just kind of getting things organized, and then the second week I went to the beach, and I spent 7 days completely by myself at the beach. Didn't know anybody. Just, stayed in an Airbnb, and so I saw the guys that ran the Airbnb, but didn't have contact with anybody that I knew for a week, and spent a lot of time reading and praying and listening to music, and got a lot of insight into, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Then I arranged for the second week, for the next week, the third week, I guess, to spend a week on a personal retreat at a ministry center called Fairhaven Ministries in East Tennessee, up in the mountains, no internet. I only got phone service when I was down at the main lodge. So again, all by myself, but this time with a therapist. And one of the things that the therapist did with me, which I had not realized in my life, is that I've been through a lot of trauma. And different kinds of trauma, but I had never acknowledged in my life that it was trauma. And so, because I had not acknowledged that in my life, a lot of it was festering. And when something festers and you keep picking at that scab, it just gets worse, and sometimes it cleans up, and then you pick at it and it festers again. It's a really gross analogy, sorry. But so what she helped me do was debride the wound, which means you clean out all that junk so that it can heal. And that song by Point of Grace that we sing, heal the wound but leave the scar, so I know how merciful you are. That song just came to me over and over again. And while I was at the beach, the scripture the Lord gave me was, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and he who knocks, the door will be opened. So I've been seeking, I've been asking, and I've begun knocking on doors to see if I will serve again in overseas mission, because that is my calling. Since I was 19 years old, the Lord called me to work in cross-culture ministries. So I have always been in ministry my adult life. Not all of it has been overseas, but that's where I feel like the Lord is really taking me. And another scripture that came to mind that, like Debbie was saying, the Lord is working, or like that song, in Matthew 9:13, he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And the thing that struck me most about this was, it doesn't say go plant, doesn't say go weed, it says go harvest, which means the Lord is already working there. Wherever there is, whether it's down the street or across town or wherever you go, God is already there working, and he's just calling you to harvest, to be a part of reaping his children into his family. And I just thought, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way before, that no matter where I go, God is already working, and he just needs me to be his hands and feet, and Jesus with skin on, right? So one of the things, another song that just kept playing over and over in my head, and I actually, if you have not heard Lauren Daigle's new album that she just won the Grammy for, you need to check it out. every single song has incredible thought behind it. And You Say, of course, is the one that she won the Grammy for, too, the main song that they're actually playing on secular radio now, too. But there are so many other songs on that album, and one of them that just keeps playing over and over in my head, it's called I Remember. And when I was going through and writing my trauma diary, because I had to write a trauma timeline for my therapist, this kept coming back to me. In the darkest hour when I cannot breathe, fear is on my chest, the weight of the world on me. Everything is crashing down, everything I had known. When I wonder if I'm all alone, I remember. I remember you have always been faithful to me. I remember, even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there. I will lift up my eyes, even in the pain, above all the lies. And when you've been through trauma, there are a lot of lies you tell yourself. I know you can make a way. I have seen giants fall. I have seen mountains move. I have seen waters part because of you. I remember. I can't stop thinking about your goodness, I can't stop thinking about your goodness. I remember, you have always been faithful to me. I remember, even when my own eyes could not see, you were there, always there with me. And the Lord has just been so real to me in the last several weeks and reminding me of, even though I have been through some pretty traumatic things, He has always been there for me. And I am just continuing to seek and to ask and to knock and letting go and letting God open the doors.
I have something quick. Yeah, everybody's been talking about the songs, and during Waymaker, pull it up again. No, Waymaker, I was really thinking about that, like, how has he made a way for me? And sometimes when God makes a way, he has to tear us down. And what I mean by that is, for me, he gave me what I wanted, because I was the one who tore myself down. Because he's the promise keeper. Todd was talking about adversity and why things happen and you don't always understand. And through my biggest adversity and my hardest times, I could make promises to you and you and you. I can make promises to myself, but I can break those promises, and he's not going to do that. And I remember, there's a long period of time where, I was a non-believer or whatever you want to call it. I'd be like, okay, whatever created everything, that's a God, whatever. But he made a way for me where he gave me what I wanted. And inside, I kept going deeper and deeper and into, I was just not happy. I wasn't happy. And again, tying back to Todd, that was the only way that I could find him. Because when I had nothing else left, where else was I going to go? And I would have said over and over, like, no, I would never ask God. Well, that's what I did. And when I knocked, he opened the door. Because he keeps his promises. We can all try, we may mean well, but we can't always keep our promises. But I just wanted to say that. He'll keep all his promises. So.
These songs, they really, really spoke to my heart today. I just, especially the last two songs, that Elevation Worship song, You Have Never Failed Me Yet. I mean, that just really tied into, it brought everything together for me. And especially, Waymaker, when does this song not bless you? I mean, this song is so powerful. God has really worked. As I think Todd was talking about how these songwriters today, I mean, they're tapping into the Lord. There's no doubt about it. I mean, with songs like this, to feel the Spirit of God, and I did feel the Spirit of God today, but what I was thinking about was, you've never failed me yet. I know that we sometimes go through trials, we go through tribulations, and the crazy thing is, I mean, you may see that there is no way out. Like, how am I going to get out of this mess I'm in? You know? How many times have you felt like something like that in your life, and you just feel like it's hopeless? And that bridge, even when I don't see it, you're working. My mind immediately went to the book of Esther. Okay, here the Israelites, the Jews, they were in captivity. Okay, they're in captivity there, and they've got this evil guy named Haman working against him. He hates them. He wants to wipe them off the face of the earth. You remember, I think it was last year we had a time where we got together and we studied the book of Esther. And it's really an amazing book. Well, you know, the odd thing about the book of Esther, and you may not know this, is that it's the one book in the Bible where God is never specifically mentioned. It never says Lord or God or Yahweh anywhere through the book of Esther. Okay? It just doesn't say it there. But just because we don't see him in there does not mean he's working. If there's anything that's true about that book, and you'll see how it turned around through Mordecai's faithfulness and Esther operating with faith, coming to the presence of the king, then at the end, boy, did you see God working. And he gave deliverance to those people when they could have utterly been decimated by Haman's evil acts. But instead, Haman and his family were decimated. There was that vengeance, that where God avenged these people because of their faithfulness. And if there's just one thing I want to say today, I don't know who's going through what today. I don't know. Trust in God. Believe me. He's working, and he has deliverance for you.